Good afternoon, everybody. It's always weird being the first presentation after lunch because it's either really like in a food coma or you're like really hyped, like yes, let's start doing cool stuff with automation. As Katie mentioned, I'm Jonathan. This is Matt. We're on the professional services team, and this is the kind of stuff that we do with all kinds of environments, whether it's education or big organizations, enterprise. Anything can use DEP, and we'll talk about all the different forms of DEP as we go through, but essentially, DEP does not necessarily mean just drop and ship in a computer and it's just images. No, there's a lot of things going on here. We're going to talk about provisioning, which is something that rhymes with imaging, but not necessarily imaging. We're going to go through DEP in 30 seconds, like quickly what actually is DEP. Some of us in here have heard the word DEP, have heard the word zero-touch. What does it actually mean? And it's going to mean something completely differently to everyone. What zero-touch actually means? Someone's touching the computer. The computer's not going to unwrap itself in the shrink wrap. It's not going to boot itself up. Someone's touching the computer. We'll talk about who's going to touch it. Maybe it'll be you. Maybe it'll be end users. Advanced DEP, some nerd thing at the end. So whoever laughs at that, kudos. I didn't. And user feedback interaction, UFBINU. So that's an acronym we made up. So Matt is going to talk about.
Yeah, we're going to talk about provisioning. And for the purpose of this presentation, we're going to be talking about provisioning. It's like, as John said, it's like imaging, at least it rhymes with imaging. Some people call it configuration, setup, processing. I've heard thin imaging, thin-ish imaging. The fact is, as long as you're not starting with a golden master image that's been configured and pushed to the device, you're doing some kind of provisioning that's based on a vanilla OS or an out-of-box Mac. And some examples of that is the once per computer standard build, your run once policies, your ongoing app installs that occur via a smart group, any kind of compliance or security workflow that you have that's keeping the computer in check. And even if you look at your configurations that's up in Casper Imaging, that's basically provisioning. So, what did we used to do? Back in the day, hop in the Wayback Machine, you either had to image the Mac with a DMG or have some tech guy take it out of the box, push all the OS upgrades and install the things and do the settings, and it wasn't great. You got monolithic imaging, possibility for human error, it doesn't scale well, and honestly, keeping that up to date is a nightmare. So we probably are looking at something better. What are you guys doing now? You probably have some clever policies. You have a little bit of dialog boxes, user interaction, and these are great. They're multiple connected steps, things that trigger one thing off to another, and it's not perfect, but it's great. So one of the things I like to teach my customers is that provisioning workflows are like building with Lego blocks. You got that really clever, clear, plastic, curvy piece that's great for a spaceship, but it's not super useful elsewhere. So what we try and build out is modular policies. The idea that instead of a Chrome installer that's doing your messaging, your dock icon, your install, your user preferences, all of that in one killer policy, you can't use that policy elsewhere. But if you break that policy out into several connected pieces, and then call those individual pieces when you want to with other connected policies, or in fact a script, then you're able to reuse all of that work that you've done earlier elsewhere in your Jamf server. So the way you could be doing it and the way you should be doing it is a script. Take all of those modular blocks, build out a script, and you're able to pivot or change the script useful for multiple different workflows. If you have, let's say, someone in accounting needs something slightly different, you clone that script and then just edit out one of the pieces or add a few extra steps. And a lot of that logic can be handled in the script instead of the policy itself. And also, something that you'll notice in the script is we're using the Jamf binary, and we're calling policy, trigger, type, and a name, if you're not familiar with Jamf triggers or events. Pro tip for everyone, try not to call your policies by policy number, which is easy to do. You're like, oh yeah, just type sudo Jamf policy number 20, and you know what policy 20 is. But it's hard to debug that, and if you're looking at your script, not everyone knows what policy 20 is. And if you ever migrate your Jamf database or move from production or a test environment or a Jamf cloud to a different server, it's probably not going to be policy 20. So it's really helpful to start referring to all of your policies by event ID, trigger type name, instead of the actual policy number. So we're going to take that, the idea of provisioning, building it in modular blocks, taking your script, and then putting it all together in some sort of advanced, self-healing, killer, full-screen user experience that your users have the opportunity to watch, and they can't mess up while the machine is being provisioned. So the reason we love this is because it's obviously Apple supported. Moving forward, obviously imaging is not a thing of the future and not even possible in some of the operating system. It keeps it clean, based on a fresh OS, and the best of all, your users can do it. So this is all possible and necessary to be based on DEP. And John's going to talk about DEP.
Cool. Yep. So that's provisioning. Provisioning is going to be done all in Jamf Pro. And that's going to be your policies, like Matt said. It's going to be your custom triggers if you apply those to some sort of script or workflow that are going to call those custom triggers to do the said provisioning on the target computer. But you can't do that zero touch without DEP. Now, for those that don't know what DEP is, we're going to do a quick run through. DEP is an Apple-managed and Apple-provided program that you can, when you buy computers and computers you already have through third-party vendors, apply those to the DEP program. The DEP program, if they're Apple-authorized providers, that is, once they're in your DEP program, you can have things happen to those computers when they boot up and activate with Jamf Pro. The catch is, for Macs, they have to be on the internet to do it. iOS and tvOS require internet at the get-go to activate. So the key here, again, is that internet thing. Provisioning DEP brings together Zero Touch. Now, to set this up, if you don't already have DEP, you do have to do step 0 that you see up on this board. So step 0 is the yellow jagged line. That's the actual setup on the back end. So that will include you going over to deploy.apple.com, creating your own DEP account, and once Apple verifies your company information, they can link everything together with your purchases in the past, your purchases of now. You may have to do some hunting if you acquired computers or devices from all different parts of the earth. We can get as many of those into DEP as we can. Once you do have the DEP, then the magic starts happening. Your computers, once they join internet, will shoot up to Apple, activate, verify with Apple that this computer is, hey, owned by, for us, Jamf, and it will shoot that information back to Apple DEP, gather the information needed to enroll that computer automatically. That's the zero-touch cool thing about it, and get all the rest of its information from the JSS to do its provisioning. Now, there's a couple other things in there that you have to set up. For instance, the pre-stage enrollment, which is going to house a bunch of settings that are going to be applied the moment the computer hits the activation. So it's going to come down and say, if you require authentication for the computer, if you have an LDAP that's going to require a password before you get to the desktop, things like that. Or if you're going to bypass a bunch of those startup assistant things that may not necessarily be as applicable in your environment, you can do that all through the pre-stage. Once you have the pre-stage going, that's when all the fun things you can configure to be applied, like your policies, so all the apps. Or the CIS requirements, have those come down. Configuration profiles, all of that can be based on how you scope out your pre-stages and how you scope out your extension attributes and smart groups. Once you have all that in place and built up, step 4 is the turning on the Mac, and bing, bang, boom, your computer is provisioned. It's that simple to the end user. There's a little bit of setup in the beginning, but once you have it set up, then you'll be able to just streamline all your processes. So everyone now know what DEP is? Cool. Yeah, all right, now we're going to get into the advanced stuff. So again, one last hurrah, deploy.apple.com. Got to set it up in Jamf Pro. That's going to be your pre-stage, your scoping of the groups, all the custom settings, apps, configurations, and policies. Turn on the computer, the internet, and it's enrolled. How is it different than what we're doing right now? Well, it's not that different. It's the same, but different, but it's also kind of the same. It's just another way to enroll your devices that's in the highest level. But to the end user, it's going to be magical. Now, how is it the same? Policies are going to be the same. You're already using policies. Configuration profiles, you're already using configuration profiles. Self-service, you're already using self-service. They're going to get all of those things. The good thing is the things that were manual, the enrolling, the manually installing a quick add package, SSHing into a computer or a bunch of computers, or your network guys are going to hate you because you're doing a port sniff or an IP scan of your entire network and just enrolling all the machines. That's all that is not manual anymore. So you can do that automatically. And the last thing, you can allow the MDM profile that gets applied to the computer to be enforced. Now, there are ways to get around this. If the end user is an admin and they know all the steps necessary, yes, they can remove the MDM profile. However, all the profiles that get applied through DEP will have that little minus sign that you see in system preferences for profiles. It'll be grayed out. So your end users won't be able to necessarily remove it as easily as they could before. Now, we know what DEP is. We know what provisioning is. Let's make it work together.
And what do we get? Zero touch. Everybody says zero touch. I got to get that zero touch. Man, if we were doing zero touch, it'd be the best thing in the world. Zero touch is just provisioning workflow with DEP attached to it. So the idea that the machine will automatically enroll, run through setup assistant, your policies and packages come down as usual, some optional user feedback gets sent off, and then the Mac is fully configured. So the thing about zero touch is that because it's occurring during setup assistant, timing is essential, right? We've got an on-enrollment trigger that Jamf binary uses, and that's occurring during setup assistant, and the user isn't created yet. There's actually another user that's in the background doing the work, and it's called MV setup user. I'm sure some of you people who've been around for a while know what that guy is. And your DMG installers or any policies that are pushing down packages that are based on a user folder, it's not going to work because it's going to put it in the wrong user folder. And a reboot at this point is not a great idea. If you've got a policy that forces a reboot, during setup assistant, doesn't resume great. And also, if you're pushing any dialog boxes, they might not show up in front of the setup assistant. So I built out a timeline that's actually based on a pretty clever thing I got from Francois. This is basically the timeline of setup assistant. You turn on the computer, it boots up, it gets on the internet, be it Wi-Fi, Ethernet, whatever, and it reaches out to Apple. It gets its DEP information. You're going to see this. If you successfully got it talking to DEP, it's going to say your device is going to be managed by somebody. Click OK. This is a really cool part. We have the opportunity to have authentication during DEP, where if the user is providing their Okta credentials or going through an LDAP lookup or even an actual JSS user, they're able to authenticate in, and we can use that information to create the user later on. So if you've configured any skip panes, if you've decided to bypass a few things, they're suppressed at this point, and you can skip right along into the user creation step. At this point, the Jamf binary gets installed, and the enrollment complete package is run, or the enrollment complete trigger, sorry. The downside to it is we don't know how long this process takes. You may skip all the panes, you may skip none of the panes, and your users might just take like 15 minutes to do it, maybe go to lunch, they sleep at the computer. So we can't be certain exactly when the user gets created and when the Jamf binary is fully installed. So for that reason, we know that we have to time it just perfectly, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. Sorry. So user complete finishes up, and then they're off to Finder. It is at this point that realistically the end user experience needs to occur, but we have to have it installed before we can trigger it. So let's talk about DEP with zero touch. I have had a lot of customers talk about all the amazing things that it'll do for them, and if they could just get it working and they can go through that process with Apple and get it on board, it's going to change their life. It's not going to get you a raise. It's not going to bring you all kinds of glory. It will not fix your policies. It will not update your apps. It doesn't automatically restore the Mac, but it is the really cool thing that we're all doing. And DEP is perfect even if you're not going to be doing zero touch. There are advanced workflows that we have that can leverage DEP, and John's going to talk about some of the advanced implementation.
Yeah, thanks. So the advanced implementation is going to use the zero-touch mentality and DEP, but these methods, they go to 11. That's right. So we are going to talk about the zero-touch, the imaging thing. at the end, but we're all going to talk about the huge security benefits with DEP, the various self-service activated provisioning that you can do with your end users and their computers, that they can do that single touch or that zero touch, adding in some dummy files or Bom File Receipts for your packages, launch agents and daemons, and then again, the cool thing that everyone's seen when you go to jamf.com, that little post-it on the computer that says, open the box, set up your Mac, love IT, that's it. And it just happens. That is the goal.
There is no step 3.
There's no step 3, that's right. So in the security side of DEP, Matt talked about this, you can require a password payload. So normally when you go through the setup of a Mac, it does not ask for any kind of credentials to be passed to any other server. You just boot up the computer and you're going to see set up a local account. That's it. With DEP, you can have the computer not get anywhere until they've entered their credentials. If it's wiped or stolen, the moment it comes back online and activates, it's going to ask for those passwords again. If there are no credentials provided, you can set up to lock the system. This can all be done, and it can all be done on the Jamf Pro side using a bunch of different configuration profiles and DEP pre-stages. In terms of self-service, you can have the computers boot up, the end users can log in, and based on what they've logged in with or who the user belongs to, anywhere, if you're not necessarily doing LDAP authentication at time of DEP, you can have the end users provision their own machine through the self-service portal. So in self-service, when you boot up the computer, based on whether the computer has certain applications already on it, or if there's going to be just a basic, so if like the finance team needs a certain group of apps or certain configurations, they can go into self-service and click one button to call all those custom trigger policies to execute on their computer, thus provisioning the computer in the way they want. The cool thing about this is because those computers in DEP in the pre-stage, because you told the computer to make that local account a standard user, sure you have the Jamf admin user, but the standard users don't have the ability to do anything admin. They can't install apps certain ways. But self-service, they can press whatever the heck they want to press. So as long as you set the proper things up in self-service through policies, they just have to open up self-service and click a button. That's it. That's the coolest thing ever. It's like the App Store. You don't have to do any other configuration. There's no other passwords. There's no walkthroughs. There's no hassle. It's just already set up there. It's the easy button. The third way that you can implement this is based on adding files to the computer that based on either extension attributes or just normal inventory like package receipt data, you can create smart groups to scope certain things to the computer to see whether things have been applied, to see that if the computer has already been imaged. For instance, you image the computer, things get wiped, for some odd reason you have to re-enroll the computer. You have this huge list of things that are set to apply every time you enroll a computer. You don't want to re-provision a computer that's already been provisioned. All of those 5,000 bookmarks that they have in their Chrome library just get wiped, and you're SOL. So with these Bom and dummy receipts, you can have things in Jamf Pro already look for certain files that will not necessarily get touched by the end user to verify things have already been applied to the computer. As you can see in the package receipts thing, you can name it whatever you want. To create these, all you have to do is apply one line to any script, and that's just touch and then the thing. So for instance, if you want to put them in the receipts file to have Jamf Pro auto do the inventory of them and gather that information up to the JSS or Jamf Pro server, apply this at time of imaging. Just put a couple in there, put them in different places. We're all going to have those admins that are, or not the admins, we're all going to have those developers or people that'll have super admin on the computer and hunt and choose and use a little snitch to see what's going on the computer. You can kind of combat that and say, no, there's actually things there that they may not necessarily take a look at and be standard. You can do launch agent initiated provisioning, which will allow you to place a file on the computer that will execute certain bash commands, or say run sudo jamf policy or run sudo jamf policy -trigger and then your event. So if the imaging is for imaging that finance team or imaging the library lab computers, apply just this one little script to the computer, and it's going to execute every single one of those provisioning policies down to the computer automatically, again with DEP. The way this again works is when the computer has been scoped to that pre-stage as a lab computer or whatever the computer, whoever the department is going to get that computer, this will download just the launch agent, and the moment it boots up and gets the part where it can initiate that launch agent, it can do the thing. It can do the imaging, or the provisioning. Gotta get rid of that word.
Yeah, it sticks around.
Provisioning. Got it, provisioning.
You said imaging funny.
I did, didn't I? The zero-touch deployment aspect of it is the cool aspect of it, the one where you get either Splash Buddy or some really nice branded thing that happens to the computer that will block the computer so IT can let the computer image, but it's pretty enough that it doesn't impact the end user experience. The cool things about this, A, it's the way Apple wants you to do it. B, all you have to do is have a clean base OS. So as long as you can boot the computer back to fresh, you're golden. Just do either recovery, internet recovery, or fresh out of the box, and it's just going to happen. Based on your policy structure, if you do it a proper structured way, you can have every single app that gets deployed be the latest and greatest app. Depending on your workflows throughout the rest of your Jamf Pro server, you may not necessarily have to enter a new or apply a new update of a version of an app to multiple different policies. You can have it update and just pull from one main master policy to always get the latest and greatest. And any user can do it. Whether it's going to allow some little prompt to prompt them for the asset tag that we put on the back of their computers. Or if it's going to prompt them for their desk seat or their name or whatever you want to apply at time of the zero-touch actual provisioning aspect of it. If it's, say they're going to name their own computer in a specific way or you need some sort of requirement in order to name the computer, you can be prompted at this
Anybody
time.
can do it? I mean, they're naming their computer. They got to have admin privileges at some point, right?
They don't.
What?
That's the best part about this zero-touch provisioning. See? Provisioning. Got it. Even non-admins. Boom. So let's take a look at how we can DEP, again, DEP all the things.
Nice. All the things. All the things are DEP. Yeah, it's 5 pretty cool things you can do that not necessarily zero-touch. Zero-touch is just one of the things you can do with DEP. I took it upon myself to try and figure out how to brand the end user experience. The thing that you're doing for your users, the placebo or the screen that they get to see. We've all heard about the IBM model, the full screen experience. We know some people wrote different approaches to that solution. And I think that before something can catch on, it's got to have a name. And before you can have a name, you got to all agree on the name. So I asked the developers of each one of the apps that are out right now, and no one could really think of one. So I came up with feedback user interaction. It's kind of selfish of me because feedback user interaction looks like FBI. And I thought that was really cool. So the user FBI. You could just call it FBI if you really want, the feedback interaction. Okay, so we already have user feedback, right? A lot of people are saying we use tools for that. There's Jamf Helper, there's Cocoa Dialog. I saw a really cool use of Pashua the other day that I didn't even try because last time I tried to use Pashua, I couldn't get it loaded. These tools are great, but what I've seen in the world, in the environments is they should be used sparingly and they should be used consistently. If your IT is talking back to the end user, we should have a consistent dialog box color and shape and location so they trust the device and they know that they haven't been hacked or there's not some crazy exploit that's running. Come on. So, I hear what you're asking. What kind of dialog boxes have you seen? How do people interact with their end users out there in the world? And I can show you what I've seen. This is not everything I've seen, but this is a collaboration of all of the things I've seen out there in the world to the end users in front of their face when they first set up their computer, and it's a nightmare. I think that realistically, we should try to avoid this experience for the end user. What we don't want here is we don't want a messy, complicated, confusing experience. Right? Excessive dialog boxes, what you just saw, it's too much. And at some point, the user is just going to give up and be like, this is confusing. Have IT fix it. I have a job to do. So what do we want from this? What do we want out of the feedback user interaction? I want to see a elegant, simple, concise experience that will stop the user from messing with your stuff and let the policies run in the background and let the provision experience happen. And ideally, it should be able to be custom branded. Obviously, Jamf Pro 10 has self-service branding capabilities, but the full screen experience can be thoroughly branded with your company or institution. Hey, we're not developers, man. Full screen experiences are expensive and complicated, and we don't have time for that. Well, it's not true. No. There it is. It isn't. I'm going to show you a few that are out there. This is Progress Screen. Progress Screen is written by a guy named Jason Trata. He's a cool cat. It's very simple. There's another one we've all heard. Splash Buddy's been mentioned a couple of times. Splash Buddy's extremely elegant, very, very slick. And there's another one out there that if you require user interaction, if you require asset tag or special information, you can get called DEP Enrollment. And those are amazing.
How'd you do this? I'll show you.
I couldn't resist the Jurassic Park reference. So remember this slide. Let's talk about where this thing's going to happen. What you have to do is take your FBI, stick it down right when the Jamf binary gets installed. So we're going to be changing out whatever you were doing at the time of enrollment with just installing the full screen user experience. And then at some point, we need to launch the user experience, either through a script or a policy. And we want to make sure that the user is logged in, it's the correct user, and they're actually at Finder. So we're going to have a launch daemon or a launch agent run at the time of dropping down onto the desktop. So for the most part, let me back it up one. All three of these user experiences that I've showed you behave essentially the same way. You package them up, you drop them on the machine, and then you have to activate them at some point. Yeah, they're configured and they're set up and they're customized, but they all work basically the same. What I'm going to do is show you how they're different so that you can possibly use them in your environment. One might not be for everybody. One might have something that's super keen that gives you, like, that's the thing that I need for my users. So we're going to go over the three different pieces of software and how they're different. So progress screen, as you'll see, is just a pump bar at the bottom that tails the Jamf log and spits out what it's doing on the screen. It lets you do customizable full screen HTML, a progress bar. It is unique in being the only one that I've seen that's scriptable. You can say OSA script, do progress bar half, or progress bar 3/4. So you can control the user experience, and you can launch it and control it using AppleScript. There are actually two pump bar styles for progress screen. You can do a waypoint, which is your 4 different markers, or you can just decide provisioning takes about 30 minutes, so I'm going to make sure it's just a progress bar that pumps along the screen, and it takes 30 minutes to complete. You have the option to hide the quit button, but if you do that, then you have to kill the app when you're done with your provisioning script. Splash Buddy. Splash Buddy's pretty fantastic. It takes a full screen experience, blurs out the background, gives your users something to watch. And the icons are customizable, the jellies come down, and you're able to customize the stuff on the left there. Splash Buddy is unique in having a built-in package installer. Right? All of the settings and customizing that you do inside of Splash Buddy, you wrap up in a PKG, and you can immediately upload it into your Jamf server. It drops a launch agent. It writes a launch agent in the user space, so it's a lot safer and sandboxed in that way. And it is the only one that's out there that shows icons and jellies for each app. And most recently, it has end actions. So when you are finished provisioning the computer, you can light up the button in the bottom corner to either say quit or restart or log out or do any number of actions that are specific to your onboarding experience. And it's in active development. I bet he's here right now. Francois? Yep, there he is. So there are a few unique things about Splash Buddy, and he's all ears for listening to how to make it better. But at present, if you're trying to put Splash Buddy on your devices right now, it requires specific app naming convention because it does a bit of regex where it parses out the name of the file. You don't have to change the PKGs on your distribution point, but you do have to change their friendly name or their physical name on the Jamf server to appname-version number.pkg. You'll have to gather up all your icons, decide how you want them displayed, deal with marketing and people who say, well, what do we call it? Is it chat? Is it communication? Is it productivity? All of that customization is set in a XML style, saved in a plist. And then you have to decide what goes on the left-hand side, just some kind of custom HTML. The last one, not to be forgotten, is DEP Enrollment. DEP Enrollment is the one that includes user interaction. It's fantastic. Lets users give back to the Jamf Pro server, and it does this using the Jamf binary. So it can run policies, and it can also use the API. The downside there is that it does require admin access. So if your users aren't admins, this is a non-starter for you. Or it just is that one extra thing where the user's like, wait, what password is this? My Mac password or is it my email password? And it's their first day. They might not know. It is pretty and unique in that it has individual check marks for each stage of the onboarding. And that mimics the sort of setup assistant look that Apple put into setup assistant, which is really clever. And like progress screen, it tails the Jamf log and puts that information down below. It also has an end action option where it displays a full screen or a window, link to something of your design, either an image or a website. So, as I said, it requires admin. It does let you give user input, and it displays the contents of the Jamf log. The details or downsides to it is it does require you to compile it on your own. You got to have Xcode. You got to build it yourself. And it does let you control those icons when the spinners go from applications checkbox, provisioning checkbox. You do that with dropping files down into application support. And you are able to control how it decides that it's finally finished and exits or gives you the quit option by dropping a setup complete file. Very similar to how we talked about the Bom files. Just touch the file in the right location and it's done. So these are your options. And we've been trying to show how each one is great and how each one is different, but realistically they're all going to the same end goal. And I think all of you are probably having your own ideas on what could be amazing. So maybe the fourth one on the list would be the one that you haven't written yet. I encourage you to try it. And we can make something pretty amazing. I think that's it.